The city never truly slept, but it did sigh. At 2 in the morning, the avenues lay washed in a sheen of recent rain, their neon signs smeared into trembling pools across cracked asphalt. Taxi horns yawned tiredly. A drunk man muttered to no one. Above it all, skyscrapers brooded like guardians too proud to stoop and notice the forgotten lives at their feet. On the corner of 14th and Madison, beneath a rusting street lamp that flickered without rhythm, sat a man most had decided not to see. His hair was a tangle of gray and storm, his jacket patched with mismatched cloth, his boots missing more sole than they kept. A paper cup, unblessed by coins, sat at his feet. Beside him, his hands curled not in supplication but in weary guard over a notebook. Battered, damp, and strangely cherished. This was Elias, once a soldier, now a ghost no one saluted. His eyes, dark as winter river water, carried the distance of deserts and nights where silence had meant survival. He seldom spoke. When he did, it was usually one phrase, "Don't talk." Police officers had long grown used to shooing him along. "Move it, old man," they would bark. "No loitering." He would stand, dust himself off with dignity, shuffle to another doorway, and the night would reclaim him. To them, he was another shadow cluttering the sidewalks of the wealthy. To himself, he was a man who had misplaced the world and never found his way back. That night, however, something broke the routine. A small figure darted across the street, barefoot, trembling, lost. A girl no older than 7, her dress torn at the hem, her hair plastered to her cheeks by rain. She stumbled, fell against the curb, and sat there, clutching her knees, sobbing softly. Pedestrians passed with practiced indifference. A pair of young men laughed as they walked by, mistaking her for a prank. A suited woman tightened her scarf and sped up. Even the police cruiser that slowed at the light glanced once, shrugged, and rolled forward. Elias, who had taught himself not to care, felt his chest twist. He had been ignored before, just as she was being ignored now. And something in her cry reached down into the marrow of all the years he had survived. All the nights when silence was his only prayer. He rose. His knees cracked like old wood. The street lamp above him flared bright for a moment. Too bright, unnaturally so, as though it, too, insisted that this moment not pass unseen. "Child," he said, his voice rough as gravel. She startled, eyes wide, ready to flee. "Don't talk," he added quickly, raising his hand. Not in threat, but in plea. The words came from instinct, the same words he had used in alleys where sound had meant danger. "Don't talk. Just breathe. Listen." The girl hiccuped, swallowing her sobs. Rain dripped off her lashes. She stared at him, waiting. He crouched down slowly, painfully. "You're lost?" he whispered, though his tone made it sound less like accusation and more like recognition. He pulled from his coat the battered notebook and tore out a page, holding it like an offering. On it, he sketched clumsy lines of a bird with wings outstretched. He pressed it into her small palm. "Birds always find home," he murmured. "So will you." She clutched the paper as if it were warmth. From across the street, 2 officers spotted him kneeling near the girl. Their faces hardened. To them, it was another vagrant pestering someone. "Hey!" one barked. "Move along, Elias. Leave her alone." The girl whimpered, shrinking against the wall. Elias did not rise. His back stiffened, and for the first time in years his voice rang out with command. "She's not trouble. She's lost." The officers exchanged looks, unimpressed. One tapped his baton against his leg. "We've warned you before. Don't start with us tonight." But just then, the girl whispered, almost inaudible, "Mommy, Mommy's gone." The words carried like a bell. Elias's heart clenched. He looked into her wet eyes and, without thinking, gathered her into his arms. She did not resist. She sagged against him as though she had known him all her life. The officers shook their heads and turned away, muttering, "Crazy old vet," as if the moment had no weight. But the lamp above them hummed once more, steady now, glowing gold instead of its usual pale white. And in that glow, Elias felt something stir in the silence, the faintest whisper of promise. A lost girl had found him, and though he did not know how, he sensed this was no accident. Morning came gray and slow. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened, catching shards of pale light. Elias sat on the same bench he had claimed for years near Union Square. The little girl curled beside him, her head resting against his sleeve. She had fallen asleep in fits, clutching the crumpled drawing of the bird as though it were a key. When she stirred, the first words out of her mouth were, "Where's my mom?" Elias swallowed. He had no answer ready. He had never raised a child, never even been steady for one. But the raw trust in her eyes demanded more than silence. "We'll find her," he said simply. "But first, you need to tell me your name." She blinked, then whispered, "Amelia." The name landed on his chest like sunlight through broken clouds. Amelia, a name delicate and unyielding, like something that could break yet chose not to. He asked where she last saw her mother, but Amelia shook her head, tears brimming. "Big place, so many people. She said she'd come back. She didn't." Elias pictured Grand Central, Times Square, one of the glitzy stores where women in pearl earrings left their children for a moment too long. The city had too many places to lose someone. His instincts as a soldier stirred. Assess, act, adapt. He had spent years letting the world pass by. But here was a mission placed in his lap, a mission that breathed and wept and called him safe. "We'll search," he said, his voice rough. He reached into his pocket and produced a crust of bread he had saved from last night. He broke it in half and handed it to her. She nibbled it gratefully. By noon, word had reached the precinct. A girl was missing. A girl belonging to one of the city's wealthiest women, socialite and philanthropist Catherine Hollowell. Photographs of Amelia's face were already being passed around. Officers were combing Midtown. Helicopters droned above. But when Elias approached two uniformed officers outside the precinct with Amelia at his side, they waved him off. "Not now, old man. Go on." "She's the one," Elias insisted. "The lost girl. She needs. Move along." He wanted to shout, to pound his fists, to demand they see. But he had spent too many years being invisible. His throat locked. Then Amelia slipped her hand into his. Small, trembling, but sure. "Don't talk," she whispered, echoing his own words from the night before. And so he didn't. He simply stood there with her, waiting. Passerby noticed. A woman in business attire paused, recognizing Amelia's face from the news alert on her phone. She gasped and called out, "That's her. The missing child." Only then did the officers finally turn, their eyes widening. They rushed forward, radios crackling. Elias should have felt relief. But as Amelia was lifted from his side, her tiny hands reached back, clinging to his sleeve with desperate strength. "Don't leave me," she cried. The officers pried her fingers free. "You're safe now," they said. But their words fell hollow. Amelia's eyes never left Elias, as if she knew safety wasn't in the uniforms but in the ragged arms that had carried her through the night. And Elias, heart pounding, knew the choice was no longer the city's to make. It was his. He could retreat into silence once more, or step forward into a bond that might break him, yet might also heal him. The reunion with Catherine Hollowell should have been simple. She was a woman of immense resources. Penthouse views, security teams, lawyers at her beck. But when she rushed into the precinct, wrapped in a coat of ivory wool, diamonds flashing on her wrist, the only thing she clutched was terror. "Amelia!" she cried, collapsing to her knees as her daughter ran into her embrace. For a moment the world blurred for Elias. He saw only mother and child, locked together as if no force could break them again. His chest tightened, not with envy, but with memory. A memory of a daughter long gone, whose face he had not seen since before the deserts took him. He pressed his hand to the washer coin at his neck, the only relic he had kept, and breathed. Yet Amelia kept looking back. Even as her mother kissed her hair, even as cameras flashed and reporters pressed against glass doors, Amelia's gaze sought Elias. "Who is he?" Catherine demanded, following her daughter's eyes. "A friend," Amelia said simply. Catherine looked at him, then truly looked, and for a second her polished mask cracked. She saw not a vagrant but a man carrying battle scars, visible and invisible. She nodded stiffly. "Thank you," she said, but her tone was cautious, as though gratitude cost too much to give freely. They ushered Amelia away. Yet that night, restless in her penthouse, Catherine heard her daughter whisper through tears, "Where's the man with the bird?" The next morning, against her advisor's counsel, Catherine sought Elias out. She found him where Amelia said she would, by the church steps near Union Square, his dog-eared notebook on his lap. "You kept her safe," Catherine admitted. "She hasn't stopped asking for you." Elias looked up slowly. His eyes carried no pride, no demand, only silence. "Why?" she pressed. "Why would you care?" He closed the notebook and murmured the only answer he had. "Because no one cared when I was lost." Something in his voice disarmed her. And though her rational mind warned against it, Catherine invited him to visit. Just once. Amelia needed to see he hadn't vanished like so many promises. That evening, Elias entered a world he had never known. The Hollowell penthouse, towering above the city with glass walls that reflected gold sunsets. It was sterile, pristine, like a museum curated to prove wealth could buy beauty. But in its vast dining hall, a single plate sat ready, small and pink, with a napkin folded into the shape of a bird. Amelia's doing. She rushed to him, clutching his hand, as if the night in the rain had bound them tighter than blood. They ate together, an awkward, fragile piece. Catherine watched, torn between suspicion and awe. For the first time in years, her daughter laughed, the sound echoing down the marble corridors like bells awakening a long silent house. And when night fell, Elias hummed a tune, low and steady, as Amelia drifted to sleep. A lullaby without words. A lullaby from another life. Catherine stood at the door, listening. The lamp on the bedside flickered once, then glowed warmer, softer, as though it too leaned in to listen. And in that moment, she felt it. A miracle small enough to ignore, but large enough to change everything. Some miracles do not arrive with trumpets. They come on the second morning, when the kettle whistles and Ezra, who had coughed blood into his hand last night, sits up and says without hurrying the words, "I could eat." Ryder sets toast on a plate. Ezra studies it as if it is a map, then looks at the window. "I hear," is that? Micah's humming threads through the steam. It finds a note that lives somewhere between yearning and courage. The thin man's eyes wet. "His mother sang that," he whispers, "before she got tired." He reaches for Micah's hand, and their fingers meet across the table like the halves of a bridge. The lullaby returns in odd places that day. A harried pharmacist hums it absent-mindedly while counting pills. A stoop-sitter croons it to a cat, unaware of its origin. Ryder pauses each time, unsure whether the tune follows them or whether the city has always known it, and he is only now hearing. On the sidewalk, wind chimes tinkle where there are no chimes. When Micah closes his eyes, a current of air curls around his hair. Tender, like a hand a mother might place on a fevered brow. Back at the apartment, Ryder rifles his mail and pulls out a letter he has ignored for months. A settlement offer from his former partners, a check that would nudge a life into another lane if he could stand to cash it. He has refused on principle. They pushed a feature to market that failed a safety test, and he walked and they spun the loss. The money feels tainted by a betrayal of the math that used to sustain him. Micah looks at the envelope, then at the workbench. "Is that for parts?" he asks, as if wealth is measured only by bolts and bearings and how many people they can fix. "Something like that," Ryder says. He tucks the envelope under a stack of manuals, away from the light, and from the boy's easy belief that resources exist to make things right. That night, Ezra grows quiet. His cough returns. He reaches for his backpack, digs past wadded shirts and a half loaf of bread, and retrieves a folded paper. My handwriting's bad, he warns and hands it to Ryder. It is a birth certificate, Micah Ezra Stone. The mother's name is written in careful script. Lila Aurora March. Ezra's thumb lingers on her name. She called him brave for a middle name, he says. Said he'd need it. Ryder feels the room steady. What do you need? He asks. Ezra lifts his chin with the pride of a man who still knows how to stand. Promise me, he says, voice almost shy. If I can't keep him safe, you won't let him go to people who look at him like a case file. The room inhales. The radiator sighs like surf. Beyond the window, a hammered gray sky opens a sliver and lets through a line of amber that touches the edges of their faces. It is the color of dawn even though the clock insists it is dusk. I promise, Ryder says, and it is the first vow he has spoken since he pledged to a company and broke with it like a bone that sets crooked. 2 days later, everything that has formed, tentatively, tenderly, shakes. A knock on the door. Ezra has not returned from the clinic. Ryder opens to a woman in a navy blazer with weary grace and a clipboard that tries to be neutral. Behind her, a man in a gray sweater twists a wedding ring round and round his finger, the way some folks worry. Mr. Cole? The woman asks. Ryder doesn't answer to that name often, and it startles him. Yes, I'm Naomi Patel from Child and Family Services, she says. The man is introduced as Luis, a volunteer from a shelter. We received a note from the clinic. Is Ezra Stone here? He's at the clinic, Ryder says. They kept him overnight for tests today. And the boy? Micah appears at the edge of the curtain with the intuition of the very young, who know when grown-ups are about to rearrange their worlds. He stands straighter, as if he can add inches to keep from being carried like freight. Naomi's eyes are kind, to their credit. She kneels. Hello, Micah. I'm Naomi. Your dad asked us to make sure you're okay while he gets strong. Micah looks at Ryder, not the woman. The question in his gaze is quiet but enormous. Are you brave enough to mean the promise you made? Ryder's logical mind enumerates. He is no relative. He has no papers. He is a man alone with a motorcycle and a past that turned his name to ash in one industry blog. He is not what any system labels safe harbor. Naomi reads the hesitation as consent. How else could she read it? She extends a hand. We just need to talk. There are nice families who can. Micah grips the backpack strap like a lifeline. I don't have more songs if you take me away, he says. Something in Ryder breaks along a seam and heals into a new shape. He steps forward. He stays with me, he hears himself say. His voice is steady as a level line. Temporarily, until Ezra is back. You can inspect my place. You can call my references. Do you have any? Naomi asks, not unkindly. Not the kind that live on paper, Ryder admits. He hears his mother's voice in the back of his skull. You can learn a person's truth by what they do with a quiet promise. Naomi straightens. She looks around a workbench, a bed, a chair, a boy. She's the kind of person who has seen all the ways a room can be dangerous just by existing. There are laws, she says softly. And there is love, Ezra says from the doorway. He stands there like a man who has walked through rain to get somewhere without an umbrella because the destination mattered. He sways. Ryder steadies him. Ezra's gaze finds Naomi's. Please, he says, each letter its own step. If you take him without me, you take his song. Let him stay until I can breathe like a man again. Behind Naomi, the man named Luis clears his throat. Ms. Patel, he says. Sometimes the place a child wants to be is the safest one for that child. If it is a place with this. He gestures, not at the furniture, not at the broken everywhere city, but at the space between Ryder and Micah that hums like a live wire. Naomi's training and her heart speak in different tones. Her training says paper first. Her heart says, listen to the note beneath the note. She closes her eyes for a second. She opens them with an expression that holds both law and mercy. I need to file a report, she says. But I will schedule a home visit for tomorrow. If nothing is unsafe, Micah can remain here as an informal kinship placement, pending his father's recovery, provided you agree to certain guidelines. Name them, Ryder says. School, medical check, no overnight travel. And you both. She looks at the men, one thin as a matchstick, one thick as a door. Need to sign your names. Ezra shuffles to the table. His hand shakes as he holds the pen. Micah wraps his small hand around Ezra's wrist to steady it, and as ink meets paper, a small breeze lifts loose receipts and twirls them where they sit, like confetti at a wedding no one thought to plan. The penthouse that once glittered with wealth now groaned under shadows. Curtains were drawn against the paparazzi's flashing lights, but their voices still pierced through. Reporters chanting Catherine's name, headlines spun in the night air like daggers. Millionaire's negligence. Homeless man's influence. Endangerment. Inside, Catherine sat at Amelia's bedside, her designer gown crumpled, diamonds forgotten. Her daughter lay pale, hair damp with fever sweat, breath ragged. Machines sang their relentless chorus of beeps, each one mocking Catherine's helplessness. She gripped Amelia's hand, whispering, "Stay with me, baby, please. Mommy's here." But Amelia's lips moved only once, forming the name that shattered Catherine's pride. Elias. Catherine bowed her head, tears soaking the bedsheet. How could it be? She had given Amelia everything: schools, toys, medicine, protection. And yet her daughter's hope was tied not to her mother, but to a man the world spat upon. Across town, Elias wandered streets slick with rain. He no longer had a bench. The police had cleared him out after the news storm. He drifted from alley to alley, clutching his notebook, the edges now torn and soft. He hummed to himself, low and broken, the lullaby that had calmed Amelia. The sound echoed against brick walls, thin and frail, but without her small voice beside him, it felt empty. He stopped at the steps of St. Bridget's, the church where he sometimes slept when the night was cruel. The doors were locked, but he pressed his back against them, staring at the sky. Clouds rolled heavy, moonlight swallowed. "Don't talk," he whispered to himself, but the silence pressed in too thick. His voice cracked. "God, if you're there, why send her to me? Why make me lose her now?" A gust of wind rattled the old iron gate. No answer came. He pulled the washer coin from his neck and rolled it in his palm. A token from war. The only thing that had ever felt constant. Yet tonight, even its weight mocked him. He imagined Amelia's small fingers clutching his sleeve, her eyes brimming with fear when they dragged him away. He had promised her, without saying the words, that she was safe. And now he had failed. For the first time in years, the veteran wept openly on the church steps, his tears mingling with rain. In the penthouse, Catherine's world shrank to the size of Amelia's bed. She dismissed doctors when they suggested transferring her to a private clinic. She waved off her advisors when they urged her to issue a press statement. None of it mattered. The empire her late husband had built was crumbling, but Catherine could not care. All she saw was her child's chest rising shallow. All she heard was the machines counting down her daughter's frailty. At 3 a.m, exhausted beyond reason, she wandered into her husband's old study. It smelled of leather and dust, untouched for years. On the desk sat a photograph of him cradling Amelia as a toddler, humming into her curls. Catherine's knees gave way. She collapsed